The Murdered Mistress. I'm Jason Horton.
I'm Rebecca Lieb.
And this is Ghost Town.
On October 12, 1964, the world was still reeling from JFK's assassination, when D.C. socialite and fine artist Mary Pinchot Meyer would be violently gunned down in a Georgetown park. Though the timing would put the two deaths in proximity, the beautiful socialite's murder would be forever linked to JFK's for a different reason. Since their teens, the two were romantically connected, confidants and intellectual peers. But not only that, the enigmatic painter was a bit of an icon of the times, having ties to Timothy Leary, the U.S. government, communist labor leaders, and the CIA, all of which made her case even more fascinating. According to Christopher Dickey of the Daily Beast, quote, "People who knew her could never forget her, and people who have read about her since her murder have been haunted by her story, which lies at the heart of America's ultimate undying narrative of romance and conspiracy." Today on Ghost Town, the life and death of Mary Pinchot Meyer. October 12, 1964 was a brisk autumn day, and the blonde, lanky Washington, D.C. socialite and painter had just finished a painting when she decided to go for an afternoon stroll on the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal towpath, a route she often took. It was 11 months after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and the city was still mourning their charismatic young president. The woman had plans to meet a friend to walk with, but the friend didn't show, so she pressed on down 34th Street towards the river, feeling safe. But in mere minutes, Henry Wiggins, a young Korean War veteran who was working on a stalled car behind the waterway, would hear a scream from the woman's direction. "Somebody help me," they cried. Then Wiggins heard a shot, and about 10 seconds later, a second shot. Wiggins ran towards the voice, spotting a small man with a light tan jacket and dark cap leaning over a woman's body. Wiggins ducked back behind the wall for fear he'd be the next target, then peered back, witnessing the man put something in his jacket pocket. For a split second, the man locked eyes with Wiggins. But then the cold gaze broke, and the mysterious man walked down the embankment into the bushes and trees. Wiggins immediately called for help, and 30 minutes later, PD rushed to the waterway. The victim was indeed shot twice, in the head and in the shoulder blade, likely with a snub-nosed Smith & Wesson .38. The second bullet had shattered the victim's shoulder blade and tore through her aorta. As police canvassed the towpath, they encountered a small man about 500 feet from where Meyer's body was found. The potential suspect was soaking wet, with weeds clinging to his white t-shirt. His hand was bleeding, his black pants were torn, and his zipper was open. He was identified as 25-year-old Raymond Crump Jr. and was walking away from the scene. When questioned, he told police that he had been fishing and fell in the water. Wiggins, still shaken, identified Crump as the man he had seen standing over the body, and Crump was soon arrested. Later, a tan jacket and a dark plaid cap would be found nearby and identified as his. An open and shut case, right? Perhaps, at first glance. Though Crump's identity would make headlines, it was his victims that would send shock through the D.C. community. The woman killed at the Ohio Canal towpath was Mary Pinchot Meyer, JFK's teenage crush and eventual lover, a woman who had lived many lives, but had suffered one violent and public death. Mary Pinchot Meyer was born on October 14, 1920 in New York City, the eldest of two daughters of Amos and Ruth Pinchot. Amos Pinchot was a wealthy lawyer and a key figure in the Progressive Party, who helped fund famed socialist magazine The Masses. Ruth was just as much a power player, a journalist who wrote for The Nation and The New Republic. Mary's maternal uncle was also two-time governor of Pennsylvania, Gifford Pinchot. Mary Pinchot and her younger sister Antoinette, nicknamed Tony, she will play a big role in Mary's story, I promise, were surrounded by left-wing intellectuals and raised at the family's Gray Towers home in Milford, Pennsylvania. As a moneyed East Coast socialite might, Mary went on to the exclusive Brearley School. In 1935, at the young age of 15, she started dating William Atwood, a future journalist and diplomat. While with him at a high school social event, she met young JFK, and the two hit it off. Quote, "She met JFK at a prep school dance. says Nina Burleigh, the national politics correspondent for Newsweek and author of the 1999 Mary Pinchot Meyer biography, A Very Private Woman. They were teens. He supposedly cut in on her date. Mary then went to Vassar College, where she was active in communist collegiate groups. After her graduation in 1942, she wrote for the United Press and Mademoiselle, and was an outspoken pacifist and member of the American Labor Party. It was at this point that the FBI began a file on Mary, and it didn't help that a year later, she'd marry former Marine Corps Lieutenant and fellow outspoken pacifist Cord Meyer. That spring, they both attended the UN Conference on International Organization, which was noteworthy in that it was the very conference that produced the United Nations. Cord Meyer became president of the United World Federalists in May of 1947, and with his leadership, the organization saw its membership explode, while Mary wrote for the organization's journal. In 1951, surprisingly enough, Cord was recruited by lawyer Allen Dulles to his new federal organization, the Central Intelligence Agency, or, drumroll, CIA. With her husband's fancy new CIA appointment, Mary and Cord moved to Washington, D.C., becoming woven into the fabric of Georgetown high society. In 1953, Senator Joseph McCarthy publicly accused Cord Meyer of being a communist, and in early 1954, though Dulles and his co-workers defended him vehemently, Cord Meyer had become fatigued of the fight to remain in government. And then, in the summer of 1954, John F. Kennedy, who was still at the time a senator, and his wife, Jackie Kennedy, of course, bought a house right next door to the Meyers, and JFK and Mary were reunited again. Oddly enough, Mary would often take walks with Jackie Kennedy, sometimes discussing the problems in her own marriage. On December 18, 1956, tragedy struck when Mary's middle child, she now had 3, was hit by a car near their house and died. Though the tragedy brought Mary and Cord Meyer closer for a time, the two eventually divorced in 1958. And then, something happened between Mary and JFK. Maybe it was proximity, nostalgia, or that, to some historians, JFK was possibly a sex addict, or all of the above. While it's not clear exactly when the affair with JFK began, Burleigh believes it was sometime in 1961 or 1962. Quote, her name first appears on the White House logs in October 1962, she says. She was often signed in when Jackie was away. White House counsel Meyer Feldman told me, quote, Mary was almost a part of the furniture. Washington Post editor Ben Bradley and the husband of Mary's little sister Tony, oddly enough, was also one of JFK's closest confidants, further cementing this kind of incestuous D.C. high society crew. He talks about the affair in his autobiography. Quote, like everyone else, we had heard reports of presidential infidelity, but were always able to say we knew of no evidence, none, he wrote. But after reading Pinchot Meyer's diary describing the affair, Bradley said, quote, it was clear that the lover had been the president of the United States, though his name was never mentioned. He adds that he, quote, was truly appalled by the realization of the extent of the deceit involved. We'll go into the diary, of course, and the extent of that deceit, and much, much more, after this break.
Hi, hello, how are you?
Hello.
How you doing?
How's it going out there?
We're checking in.
This is the check-in. Welcome to August, baby.
We're in it. We're
same as July.
Yep. And same as next August.
Yep.
And then the world just ends. We want to say hello to anyone who's listening to us, spreading the good word of Ghost Town. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
And the Meyers. Mm-hmm. Surprise, surprise. How do you think you get into mayordom without having a few conspiracies of your own?
Skeletons in your closet? Much?
This mayor has been accused of when they made their LinkedIn profile using one of those AI sites to make their headshots. They took a regular old photo and they LinkedIn it up.
Oh, wow. So it looked like... I just think of like a Viking. Remember when everyone was doing like Viking like theme, like Lord of the Rings style AI headshots?
No.
Oh.
I don't remember that.
Wow, I remember it vividly.
I only remember the cool stuff.
Yeah, okay. I remember everything else.
That's Kat Joselle.
Hello.
This mayor on a fitness app lied about their height and added 1 extra inch. Like anyone's going to be...
Wow.
Like anyone's going to know. But they were just like, you know,
baby?
they're just going to go up.
Okay.
No, it's gotta look just like... Or is it like 6'3"? How about 6'4"? Why not?
Wow, that's too tall.
That's too tall. Thank you. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. Your blood is circulating. It's
5'9" is perfect.
5'9", feeling fine.
Feeling fine. Well, that would be our mayor, Matthew Clemens LeRae.
Hello.
This mayor, when they order a drink at a fast food place, or it doesn't have to be fast food, and you can serve yourself, they just get a little cup of water. But then they'll get a little Diet Coke. It's illegal.
They shouldn't do that. That thimble full of Diet Coke.
What do you know what I mean? But you add that money up there, you know what I mean?
You're taking money from this tiny little hole-in-the-wall Coca-Cola company?
Yeah.
How dare you?
And McDonald's or
exactly. any giant business upon business?
All owned by Monsanto.
Exactly.
That would be our mayor, Ashley Matson.
Hello.
When this mayor is driving and they see red as a stop sign, they're like, I can make that right. I don't need to stop. I can just make that right? I can just roll. I can just roll on through.
Don't tell the DMV.
I mean, I don't know. There's been 11 episodes of Fast and Furious. Like, you know,
how about a 12?
Yeah, why not? Why not the whole plot line of the 12th? That would be our mayor, Kelly Meehan.
Hello.
When this mayor goes grocery shopping, they do self-serve. They're like, do you need a bag? They press one bag. And they charge you 10 cents. But it doesn't register. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to still take that bag because I did my part.
Yeah, I might take it too. Ooh.
But I'm not going to go back and tell. I'm not going to go, hey, can you reset this whole...
No, gotcha.
Reset the whole store?
Gotcha.
It's like, I just made 10 cents.
That's right.
Losers.
Joke's on you. Ralph's.
That would be our mayor, Casey Weber.
Hello.
This mayor has subscriptions to pretty much every streaming service.
How many I know where this is going.
How many of it is theirs? Zero. How many are they contributing to the network? Zero. They are diabolical when it comes to streaming services. They're always the second or third account on there.
This is an extreme conspiracy. This is bad. This is bad boy behavior.
Well, you're wondering whether we're just walking around with that wad of cash all the time.
They're just like, I don't need to pay for Hulu.
A wad. Vubu. Vibu.
I'll watch the Mindy Project on your dime.
Yes. Losers. That would be our very, very conspiratorial and criminal mayor, Marissa Rothermel.
Hello.
And then our governor. The conspiracies are all
Kingpin.
over the place, spanning years and decades.
Absolutely.
Who did it? They have all the answers. You think people talk about it online? They're just sitting there going, "You idiots, you're all wrong." DB Cooper? Maybe I'm related to DB Cooper. You know the drill. You know it's our governor. You know they control all. They see all. It's all conspiracy, and it's all real. Over there in Bohemian Grove. Everywhere she goes is Bohemian Grove.
Yeah,
go to Bohemian Grove? No, Bohemian Grove comes to her.
Yeah.
It's like DoorDash. It just gets delivered. That would be our governor, Avian Noble. If you want no ads, no chit-chat, bonus episodes, just the good stuff, 7 days free, head on over to patreon.com/ghosttownpod. Do you want to get back into
Let's get back to DC, baby.
We know now that JFK had many mistresses, but the fact that Mary Pinchot Meyer was one, of course, isn't the only thing that is noteworthy about her life. She was also interested in new ways of thinking, an intellectual who was curious about philosophy, religion, progressivism, of course, and psychedelics. In April 1962, Pinchot Meyer visited Timothy Leary, who later claimed in his 1983 autobiography, Flashbacks, that Mary asked him to teach her how to run an LSD session, hinting that she had a, quote, very important friend who wanted to try LSD himself. Leary said Pinchot Meyer believed that if powerful men took LSD, they would have revelations that would ultimately end world conflict. Quote, it's known that she smoked pot, adds Nina Burleigh, Newsweek correspondent and author of the book on Pinchot Meyer. Quote, I also interviewed Timothy Leary in California months before his death. He confirmed to me what he had written, that she came to his place in upstate New York and asked him to try it with her. Then she took some LSD back to, Leary believed, turn on powerful men. Burleigh added, quote, I don't think Leary was 100% a credible source on this, but he said she knew JFK had to die because he was looking to make peace with Russians, which the military-industrial powers opposed. That's a big statement. Though we know JFK got around, sexually speaking, many say Mary was different, that they had a, quote, intellectual kinship. Quote, "It's hard to say," says Burleigh. "My research led me to believe Kennedy was a sex addict, see? And like the Mad Men of the TV show. She was very upper class and ahead of her time in terms of modern art, personal style, using marijuana and LSD, very much a precursor to the culture we associate with the 1960s. In a 2008 interview with author Peter Janney for his book Mary's Mosaic, journalist and friend of Kennedy's Charles Bartlett emphasized the serious nature of Mary's relationship with the late president, stating, quote, "That was a dangerous relationship. Jack was in love with Mary Meyer. He was certainly smitten with her. He was heavily smitten. He was very frank with me about it." Now, whether Jackie was aware of this affair or not, we'll never know. Quote, "Maybe nobody knows," says Burleigh. "She would sometimes seat them together. Either that meant she trusted her, or she thought Mary was keeping Kennedy entertained in a good way. I'd hypothesize maybe the latter, as on May 29th, 1963, Mary was an esteemed guest of JFK's intimate 46th birthday party, hosted by Jacqueline Kennedy herself aboard the yacht Sequoia. It would be the last birthday celebration JFK would ever be a part of. In October 1963, a month before his death, the president wrote a letter to Mary, trying to convince her to visit him. It read, quote, "Why don't you leave suburbia for once? Come and see me. Either here, or at the Cape next week, or in Boston on the 19th. I know it is unwise, irrational, and that you may hate it. On the other hand, you may not, and I will love it. You say that it is good for me not to get what I want. After all of these years, you should give me a more loving answer than that. Why don't you just say yes?" The letter is simply signed J. Interestingly enough, the letter was also never sent, and was in the personal possession of JFK's secretary Evelyn Lincoln. As a note, the letter went up for auction in 2016 and sold for almost $89,000. On November 22, 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated. 11 months later, Mary Pinchot Meyer was also abruptly and violently killed. Fast forward to the murder case against Crump, the man that had been found in the proximity of Mary Pinchot Meyer in that Georgetown park. Though the prosecution felt they had an open and shut case against Crump, details were not adding up as neatly as they would have liked, as it already intrinsically may have appeared. First, there was no hard and fast physical evidence that linked Crump directly to the crime. No murder weapon was found. Crump had also never been known to own a gun, much less a Smith & Wesson .38. In the FBI crime report, it stated that Pinchot Meyer bled profusely from her head wound, though no trace of her blood was found on Crump's person or clothing. And there were lots of notes of conspiracy. Hours before police identified the victim as Mary Pinchot Meyer, CIA official Y. Janney placed a phone call to Ben Bradley, again Mary's brother-in-law, and they discussed the murder. According to Mary's ex, Cord Meyer, immediately after Winstar Janney phoned Ben Bradley, are you following me, about the unidentified murder, Janney then phoned him, Cord Meyer, notifying him that a murder had occurred on the C&O Canal towpath, and that the victim was in fact his ex-wife, Pinchot Meyer. The problem was that there was nothing out there publicly, deliberately speaking, that would confirm that information. In fact, Mary's pocketbook was still in her painting studio. Hence the delay in identification in general. But again, that information was withheld before the investigation wanted to release it, because they wanted that information in case anyone had come forward. So how did Winstar Janney know this information? Again, I'm not sure. This is according to Cord Meyer's autobiography, which said that, of course, CIA official Winstar Janney knew the identification of Mary Pinchot Meyer's body before many people, for sure the public did, likely also the investigation. So again, that speaks to a bit of conspiracy. In 1964, Dovey Johnson Roundtree took up Crump's case for a $1 legal fee, and at the trial, she tore the prosecution's whole argument apart. Crump, as a note, was a black man, and Roundtree, who, as a note, died in 2018 at the ripe old age of 104, was also black, a brilliant attorney who grew up in the Jim Crow South and systematically worked her way up to become a civil rights champion. At trial, Roundtree was tasked with demonstrating the police's failings in the case, and she did, establishing that Ray Crump was 50 pounds lighter and 5 inches shorter than the 5 foot, 8-inch, 185-pound male that Henry Wiggins had described to the police. Additionally, although Lieutenant William L. Mitchell estimated that the height of the man he claimed to have seen trailing Pinchot Meyer stood at 5 foot 8 inches, Mitchell failed to identify Ray Crump as that man when he testified at trial. Another strange part of the trial was that, due to the sensitive nature of her private life, Judge Howard Corcoran ruled Mary's private life could not be disclosed in the courtroom. I've never heard this before in my life. Mary's background was also kept from Dovey Johnson Roundtree, who later recalled that she would find out almost nothing about the murder victim. Quote, "It was as if she existed only on the towpath on the day she was murdered." Shockingly, on July 29, 1965, Roundtree was able to get Crump, a poor black man, acquitted of murdering a rich white socialite, a monumental task in 1960s America. After Crump's trial, no other suspects were identified or detained, much less prosecuted. And, to this day, the murder of Mary Pinchot Meyer remains officially unsolved. While author Nina Burleigh argued Crump's violent post-trial criminal history indicated his capacity to murder Meyer, Roundtree would say that Crump's future crimes were rooted in the trauma he suffered during his 8-month imprisonment while he awaited his murder trial. Other random post-trial information reveals appear to corroborate Crump's innocence in the Meyer murder, notably the likely presence of another black man at the crime scene and the fact that police dispatched a search for Crump's jacket 15 minutes before his arrest. And then there's Mary's diary. Yes, enter a private, illicit sex diary, people. On the night of her murder, Mary's sister Toni received a call from Mary's friend Anne Truitt in Japan. Truitt advised Toni and others of the existence of the Pinchot Meyer diary and the urgent need to retrieve it, given that it was highly likely to have some torrid JFK affair details inside. A decision was then quickly made by Toni, her husband Bradley, and a couple other close friends in their circle that if anyone found the diary, they would keep its existence from authorities. There are 4 conflicting versions of the events surrounding the diary, a kind of wild goose chase from 4 different friends trying to find what was essentially considered to be Mary Pinchot Meyer's JFK's sex diary. Another friend who was alerted to the diary was a man named James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's most controversial counterintelligence specialist, who was found trolling around Mary's studio himself looking for the diary. Eventually, Bradley and Toni found the thing and had it burned at CIA headquarters. On March 2, 1976, an issue of the National Enquirer quoted James Truitt, yes, the journalist and National Enquirer editor and husband of Anne Truitt, who alerted friends and family to Mary's diary in the first place, very suspicious. Anyway, Truitt publicly reported that Meyer had a 2-year affair with John F. Kennedy, and that they often smoked marijuana in the White House bedroom. According to Truitt, 2 or 3 times a week, Meyer was chauffeured to the White House in a limousine driven by a Secret Service agent, where she was met by Kennedy and taken directly to the bedroom. Truitt said the two would, quote, usually have drinks or dinner alone, or sometimes with one of the aides, and claimed that Mary would smoke a lot of weed. One time, Truitt said Mary, at that point, very high on weed, said, quote, "This isn't like cocaine. I'll get you some of that." Where this information came from, I'm not sure. But it was the first time that this is all had come out publicly. This is the first time the world had known point blank that Mary Pinchot Meyer, again, publicly was alleged to have an affair with JFK. All of this seemed to me a combination of information from Truitt's wife, White House word of mouth, etc. While the case remains unsolved, some truthers are still certain that Mary had turned JFK onto LSD, and that she was behind government operations surrounding Russia and Cuba that JFK had been making in the months before he was killed. According again to Nina Burleigh, Mary Meyer had to die, quote, because she knew why Jack was killed, and maybe even, since CIA men were her friends and lovers, who was also behind it. This camp thinks that the CIA ordered a, quote, termination on Mary in the days after the Warren Commission report came out, and hired an Army Special Forces assassin named William Mitchell, a self-identified Pentagon employee who testified at the trial of Ray Crump. We talked about him. He could not identify Crump. That he had been jogging, and he passed both Mary and behind her Crump. And yet, Mary's own ex, Cord Meyer, doesn't buy it. Meyer left the CIA in 1977, and in his 1982 autobiography wrote, quote, I was satisfied by the conclusions of the police investigation that Mary had been the victim of a sexually motivated assault, by a single individual and that she had been killed in her struggle to escape. He stated that he rejected, quote, journalistic speculation that believed his former wife's death had some other explanation. As the years went by, perceptions around this case changed or magnified or kind of stood different tests of time. Perhaps maybe even more than Marilyn Monroe in some contexts, Meyer has become a kind of underground vixen figure, a reputation that is, of course, a small and reductive part of her fascinating life, a life filled with sex, secrets, drugs, and government conspiracy, but again, is not the whole of who she was. But we can't ignore this kind of icon of the 60s, hitting the beats of things that meant so much in that era that people were fascinated by. LSD, presidential conspiracy, counterintelligence, governmental relations. She was all such a part of that in such an unexpected way. To get a sense of kind of her perception by people right now, I'll leave you with a haunting quote from Christopher Dickey of the Daily Beast. There was something about her, with her short blonde hair and slightly boyish mane, her lanky frame and casual dress, her self-assurance tinged with vulnerability. One of the men who saw her body by the canal would say later, quote, "She even looked beautiful with a bullet in her head."